because hello and welcome to another edition of the Small Bear and Pickles show. I'm Alex S. Johnson, aka Small Bear, and I'm here with my co-host Alea Celeste Williams, aka Pickles. Origin story would take hours.
Yeah.
We're very, very, very excited to welcome to our program somebody that we are working with as the co-editors of We Are Gregor, a disability rights anthology, arguably the face of neurodiversity, Rivera, aka Neurodivergent Rebel.
Oh my
And
goodness, thank you.
I have been a fan of yours. I know my whole family are fans of yours. Your research, your videos helped me when I was preparing this article that I published on my Substack, which you subsequently endorsed about some very, very troubling, I would almost call them experimentation on autistic children that was taxpayer funded and was performed at the UC Davis Mind Institute in about 2012, and it was used to get, first of all, to get funding from the National Institute of Health to the tune of $2 million by a woman who subsequently became a neuropsychologist at Kaiser Permanente in Sacramento, which is how I first encountered her. And that's basically the reason that you and I, Lyric, know one another is because of this horrible encounter with this woman who misdiagnosed me, and that became a whole series of very horrible dealings with this woman who persisted in her misdiagnosis, who wouldn't leave well enough alone, who literally stalked my social media, who trolled me, who made up fake office visits, falsified my notes, created appointments that never existed. And when I pushed back, she turned me into the threat assessment unit at Kaiser Permanente Roseville, where I got put on a list of being considered to be a security risk.
Wow.
And so I appealed this to the highest levels of the federal government, the Department of Health and Human Services. They sided with Kaiser. And so the stipulations were that if I didn't sign in with security department an hour ahead of time before any scheduled or unscheduled visits to Kaiser, that they would call the police on me and that my kp.org privileges would be revoked. Now, to me, this is abuse. This is abuse of the system against a severely disabled man who's multiply disabled. And this was signed off on by Department of Health and Human Services, their civil rights division, which is supposedly, you would think that they would be the governmental body that would be not siding with abusive practices. But Kaiser Permanente, there's literally billions of dollars involved. And so it didn't matter that I had an email exchange with the president, the CEO of Permanente Medical Group, a woman named Dr. Maria Ansari, about my severe neurological condition. The important thing was for them to cover their ass because their psychologists Dr. Kimberly Elizabeth Lanny, works for Kaiser's Roosevelt facility, had said that I was a security threat because I pushed back on a misdiagnosis. So that's how it rolls. This is how this and I know that you, Lyric, have talked about your fear and concern of the medicalization of your um I, I was about to say your condition, but it's really like we're fucking credible as neurodivergence. I think we should form a band,
Yeah. He
really.
sees
Yeah.
it as a gift in a
Power
way
a
too.
power trio,
Oh
we
Mm.
gosh.
like Cream, right? But and we could get like, well, anyway, I'm just the possibilities, right? We, we're, one of the, I'm sorry, this is an indie thing, sure, but one of the what projects we're working on is a project for, and maybe you could become involved. I don't know. I think that there's a lot of possibilities for collaboration. It's a literary tribute to Black Sabbath that we're doing for Children of the Night Incorporated. They work. Dr. Lois Lee is an attorney and sociologist in LA, and she works with these runaway kids come to Hollywood with dreams and hopes of success, and then instead they wind up on the streets, and then of course they're preyed upon swiftly. They're prey for rock and roll, and then they get turned into human meat, and by pimps and pornographers. And so we're working with Dr. Lois Lee. It's very important. We're sort of partners, charity partners with her, and we're doing the book. It's called Hand of Doom: A Literary Tribute to Black Sabbath. As and and we got some of the people that we got to write for this book. If you ever heard of a movie called The Crow, not
Hmm.
not the one, the lame version, right? I'm talking about 1994 Brandon Lee.
Oh.
Okay, right? Brandon Lee soundtrack by The Cure and Nine Inch Nails, and that one, right? Um, it's a masterpiece. It was written by two people. One of them is named David J. Scow, who created the genre called splatterpunk, and
Okay.
the other is John Shirley, who created cyberpunk, which is, if you've ever seen The Matrix, so
Hmm.
yeah, he and William Gibson and some of a few other people created created cyberpunk. He also create he writes for songs for Blue Oyster Cult, and he's one of the people who's really helped me out as far as promoting me and blurbing me and so forth. So he wrote The Crow with David J. Scow, right? And I asked John Shirley, I was like, hey, we're doing this thing for this charity, Children of the Night. Would you like to come on board? He's like, of course. And he turned around, I think it was just a couple of weeks, he gave me an original short story from the screenwriter of The Crow. Okay, it's brilliant. We have somebody, maybe I could ask your aunt, Ree, if she would like to be involved with this one. I'm sure she
Ree's
wouldn't.
the specialist of the short story.
Okay, okay. So Ree, if you're out there, if you're watching, I know you're watching right now. Lyric says you're the specialist of the short story. Okay, so don't make her a liar, right? You'll be okay. So you're in Dastardly Damsels, right? With a bunch of people who are also many of whom are my friends. If you join up with that, join up with Nocturne Corn Books. Well, she's also part of We Are Gregor. And so I got all these famous people to participate in this book. But one of the most extraordinary is that my close friend Terry Lee Chrome, who founded the Runaways, when I asked her if she would be interested in writing a story for the Black Sabbath book. I mean, okay, so if you ever seen the movie The Runaways, have you heard their albums, you know the song California Paradise, right? Turn on the radio, hear the rock and roll, I mean, it's
I
sung
don't know
as
that one. Sorry.
what? Okay, well,
I'm a
it's
failure.
No, you're okay. He's had to show me a lot of music that I didn't know that,
I mean,
you know.
most people think of Cherry Bomb, right?
Yeah, I know that one. That
that's
one I
Yeah,
know.
sure.
right?
That's like
I know that one.
That's by an awful
one
person,
that a lot of people know.
sung by an awful person named Sherry Curry, singer of yes, sorry, she has me blocked on Facebook, so she's not going to see that.
Oh no.
Sherry Curry. And she's MAGA. She calls herself Lady MAGA. She's also transphobic, deeply transphobic. The whole thing about like wearing the basically dressing like a prostitute when you're 15 years old. She gave an interview in 2020. She said, "Oh yeah, we exploited ourselves." That is not the narrative that I get from people like Jackie Fox, the bass player, or Terry Lee Crum, who founded the band, right? So there were. I'm not going to get into because there's a lawsuit. So I'll just say if you Google Terry Lee Crum and Kim Fowley and Rodney Bingenheimer, and I will leave it that to your, everybody's capable fingers. Look up Rolling Stone, look up Huffington Post, look up Jackie Fox, Rodney Bingenheimer, Kim Fowley, Terry Lee Crum, and that's all I will say about that. But so let's just say that she was a victim. She, the founder of the Runaways, was a prey to abusers, to sexual abusers. She is also autistic, and that played a part in her sort of being innocent and naive as far as being a victim or I would say a survivor, because she's an extremely strong person. But she told me that the trauma, she'll have to be in therapy for her entire life. And so I was looking around for a charity to back up my anthology. See, the thing with anthologies is there's 3 routes you can go. If you're traditional, if you can get money, if you have money, like if you're a St. Martin's, if you're one of the big 5, you can afford to pay the likes of John Shirley, right? You could get Stephen King, you could get Clive Barker. If you're an independent, a lot of people go the crowdfunding route. The third option is charities. And so I decided I wanted to be able to get the biggest names in horror fiction, right? But without any money. So how do you finagle that? And this is kind of like we've had to do a crash course in business and promotion and playing on a scale which is, we're competing with the majors, not just the other independents, but we're competing with the majors. And actually, we're kind of revolutionizing publishing, with what we're doing. So I got all these people involved with the anthology, with the Hand of Doom, and then we got Black Sabbath involved with the anthology, right? Which was crazy, So, but literally, Tony Iommi is reading this book, and I'm so excited, and probably Ozzy, and I mean, definitely Tony Iommi, right? He's the Hand of Doom, right?
Such
He's
an honor.
the man, right? And so we are Gregor. So we're here to talk, and I've been blobbing away. Okay, Lyric Rivera. Um, talk to us, talk to our viewers about your journey towards becoming, what is your origin story of becoming the neurodivergent rebel? How did that start?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, it really started when I was little, but I didn't realize, like it was, I kind of started more with this awakening that happened when I was a few months shy of my 30th birthday. And I was going through a physical and mental health crisis, and I'm about 130 right now,
Mhm.
and I'd wasted down to about 95 pounds, which is not, I'm 5'2",
Oh my
but
gosh.
that's 5'3". That's not a healthy weight for someone of my
Yeah.
size. And I'm a stocky, short person. But I wasn't, and I was just like really unwell mentally, just not that mental point where you're just kind of at that breaking point where you're ready to give up and you just don't have
Mhm.
any fight left in you. I was getting to that point, and I had
Yeah.
this job that I'd had for a few years, but we'd like changed to a new office, and the physical environment had suddenly changed, and uh, there was a bunch of things that had suddenly been asked of me that weren't in my job
Mhm.
description all of a sudden thrown on me, and my health just rapidly had started declining in about 6 months. And my employer knew I was really sick. I was going all to these doctor's appointments trying to figure out what the heck was going on with my
Yeah.
health. Um, and eventually, after months and months of tests and trying to figure something out, my GP was like, "Oh, I don't think there's anything physically like wrong with you, so we'd like to send you out to get a mental health assessment for maybe anxiety or something."
Mhm.
And by luck, maybe 6 months or so earlier, I had, because at the time in addition to the job that was just like really killing me, I had my own business as a dog trainer. And so I had been studying books on animal behavior and animal psychology. And I'd come across a book. I don't remember the title anymore. I just know it was by Temple Grandin, and it was an animal behavior book. And it was about animal behavior. It wasn't about autism, but throughout the pages, Temple weaved in talking about what their experience like being autistic and how it
Mhm.
helped them relate to animals.
Yeah.
And when I heard Temple explain what their experience of being autistic was like, I was just like, well, that's just like me. Maybe I'm autistic. But then I had gone and Googled autism, and this is like more than 8 years ago.
Right.
And I came across like Autism Speaks and a bunch of really gloom and doom parent blogs and all these
And
things that were non-autistic people describing autistic people from the outside looking in. And it was like not how I saw myself, not how I would describe myself. It's like they were
yeah.
describing things we were doing, but they assigned the completely wrong meaning and reasoning behind
Yeah.
what they assumed was why we were doing things based on why they would have done things with their completely different neurology. So I didn't see myself in that. So I dismissed it and I'm
Yeah.
like, no, that's not
Yeah.
me. But because I was referred for mental health assessment, which is something I believe is the first one I've ever had in my life, I could be wrong,
Right.
that I remember, but my memory is a little funky. Um, I was referred, and I said, hey, since I'm gonna do this head doctor thing, and I was not very mental in health or trauma informed or anything back then. It's kind of funny to see how far I've come since then. I was like, can I at least see someone that like knows something about autism? I'd like to rule that out.
Right.
Which nothing was ruled out. I got an autism diagnosis and a social anxiety diagnosis at the age of 29. And it took me a while to really come to terms with both of those things. Uh, and honestly, when I was diagnosed autistic, I went through really all of the whole stages of grief. I was really angry for a
Yeah.
while because uh, like once it started to actually sink in and I got out of the denial phase and the bargaining, because at first I was like looking up online trying to look for
Right.
evidence I wasn't really autistic, that it had
Yeah.
somehow been a mistake.
Yeah.
But luckily I found other autistic voices in like Tumblr and Twitter, and uh I'd been recommended some books by the psychologist who diagnosed me by
Mhm.
autistic authors, anthologies actually.
Oh,
And
cool.
so, like, reading those, a bunch of different autistic people describing what it was like to be autistic, I saw myself. And so when I did go back to the internet and start Googling and found those non-autistic descriptions again, I was just like, oh no, okay, I understand why that's not it.
Right.
But it also helped me realize like that there are so many autistic people out there that probably have no idea they're autistic, because when you think of autism, you're, especially back then, you weren't hearing autistic people explain what being autistic was like. It was
Yeah.
very much dominated by non-autistic people, uh, describing us like ants under a magnifying glass, but not really
Yeah.
understanding why they do the
Yeah.
things that we do, and making a lot of assumptions.
Right.
And I realized that, you know, if more of us had like the first person human experience of what it's like to be autistic, instead of these fully medicalized, all negative gloom and doom
Right.
labels, because you know it's you know, it's not, it's like it's not all good or bad. It's not a
Yeah.
superpower or a curse.
Right. Right. Right.
Right.
It's both of these things, and we lose the human nuance in it, in the
Yeah.
discussion,
Yeah.
when we only talk about autistic people and weaknesses. And so
Right.
that was kind of my aha moment, is that autistic people should be leading the conversation about autism, and really in neurodiversity, neurodivergent people should be leading the conversation about what it's like to be a
Yeah.
neuro minority. And so I wanted to give us a platform where we could share those experiences
Hmm.
with both people that might wonder if they themselves might be neurodivergent, because there's a lot of
Sure.
us out there that, especially I'm 37, my age group
Right.
and older, who just we weren't
Yeah.
examined growing up, like
Right.
and so there's a lot of us out there that don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and I've just had so many thoughts.
Yeah.
Well. One thing that actually when I started researching my article about Dr. Blythe Corbett and Dr. Kimberly Lanny and their experiments on autistic children, um, I was very concerned about how Corbett and Lanny was really Corbett who got the grant to study autistic children, and Dr. Corbett, who is at Vanderbilt University, she's a psychologist at Dr. Vanderbilt University at Vanderbilt University. Obsession is with the HPA axis, which is the basically it's fight or flight. Because I had to boil it down for the people and for my own understanding, just to boil things down in simple terms. So she studies, and she's been doing this for the last more than a decade. What she does is she studies spit. Okay, she takes spit samples from autistic children, and she examines them for their cortisol levels, which means that's the hormone that the body emits when you're under stress, which is our bodies are hardwired for um, for for being actually it's very, very primitive adjustment that our bodies have made in our early in developmental stages, or early in evolutionary stages, for dealing with emergencies like saber-toothed tiger is going to
Mm-hmm.
eat your children, right? So you have to be willing to and able to, instead of just freezing with fear, you have to have those those stress hormones and those those that adrenal response, which puts your body in a state of super vigilance, right? And you can kill that saber-toothed tiger or whatever, and then you draw it
Mm-hmm.
on your cave, right? So this adaptation is what is why we experience fight or flight in social situations where it's maladaptive. So what Dr. Corbett does is she deliberately exposes autistic children almost as they were bugs under a microscope to stressful situations, stressful for autistic people, especially, to see whether or not they're going to be stressed out, which seems like completely insane behavior. But she gets millions of dollars from the government to to basically prove that water is wet. Um, one of the astonishing things that I discovered, because although I've had students who were autistic,
Mhm.
and I loved watching Temple Grandin's movie with Claire Danes. I thought that was a beautiful film, and I didn't really know too much about autism. I knew about stimming. I knew about Grandin and her ability to understand where animals were coming from because of her more the way her brain is wired.
Hmm.
But 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 my understanding of what autism is or was shaped by movies like Rain Man.
Hmm.
So growing up in the 70s and 80s, you see Dustin Hoffman. It's a brilliant performance, but that was, oh my gosh,
One.
you know, so I think a lot of people, including my own parents, who are in their 80s, my dad always likes to do the Dustin Hoffman Rain Man, Judge Wapner at 5, and Excellent Driver. He loves
Hmm.
that part.
Yeah.
And I think that for a lot of people, their idea of autism is really savants, so who are kind of and the way that autism has been portrayed is sort of monolithic. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not autistic, but
And they
but
think we grow out of it a lot of
but
times,
yeah,
or we're institutionalized and we can't ever take care of ourselves. Like
yes,
it's assumed, although, we're there's a likelihood, you might have an intellectual disability on top of being autistic, just as you might be intellectually gifted. You can go in
sure,
either direction, just like if you're not autistic.
right,
But if you are neurodivergent, you usually have multiple layers to your neurodivergence, and autistic people often have sensory, motor, and intellectual differences in addition to being autistic
hmm,
that
Mhm.
tend to be in extreme ends of things. And so if we have complex motor control differences that can make things like speaking or taking
right,
care of the self difficult,
yeah,
it can appear as if you don't know what's going on around with you, even if you are quite sharp.
yeah,
And then at the same time, if you also have an intellectual disability, or anything that makes it harder for you to care for yourself, like it is had more attention on that's what autism is, but really
yeah,
those autistic people usually have other co-occurring conditions and differences in addition to being autistic that make their
right,
lives more difficult. Just that's why in the DSM or the ICD, where they
yes,
diagnose the mental health
mhm,
conditions
right,
and really all kinds of conditions,
right,
Mhm.
you'll notice with autism it says, do they have additional learning disability
right,
or intellectual disability in
you know,
addition to being autistic? So having a learning disability isn't like something you have to be autistic. Or it's also
right,
it's like, do you have another motor control issue? They're
right,
not
right,
things you
right,
have to have, but that's what people assume you must have to be autistic.
yes,
Which means if you don't have those things, a lot of times you are either ignored or discounted, and your struggles are completely ignored. And that was the thing for me. I was really
yeah,
like my skills, like reading and vocabulary, like I taught myself to read when I was like 1.5 years old
right,
because I was gifted in that one area.
yeah,
Anytime I struggled in any other area, it was like, you're being lazy. Look how good you are at reading. You're not applying yourself. And it was like I was doing my best, and I was just being told my best wasn't good enough over and over again, just breaking down my self-esteem and making me think I would
yes,
never be enough. Because I was good at reading. So it was like when
right,
you're good at one thing, it's
Mhm.
like, gotcha. This other thing,
yes,
and it was my whole life was a giant gotcha game
Yeah.
because I wasn't
yeah.
well-rounded. I'm
Al
spiky.
Al Al Alea,
Mhm.
Alea, I think, has something to say to this point, right?
Oh, well, oh yeah, I can. Oh yeah, I can agree with that on so many levels. But um, I'm definitely neurodivergent, and I'll just be upfront. I don't know if I'm autistic because I've never been diagnosed. Um, Alex and I have been talking about it a bit. We think I might be. So it's something I might need to have. I'm gonna have this, you know, have to have it checked out and find out. But because like growing up, I didn't, my, after my parents divorced, going through school, being the oldest of three kids, and also having to um, also look after my younger siblings while my mom was working, and um, on top of that, there's a whole bunch of stuff, um, but there were times where my mom was, it was recommended by like my teachers or the people at the school would recommend that I get, have my mental health looked at,
Mm-hmm.
and I think, with all the struggles my parents were going through, having been being, in a divorce that was kind of difficult, and having to also, afford to, raise your kids and everything. That was one of
Mm-hmm.
those things that kind of went to the wayside, and I didn't really get, like, probably that kind of, maybe I should have gone to some doctors about that. But this is something that my mom was, I think, also, she was also scared too, because she was institutionalized when she was in her young teen years. And so she had trauma from her institutionalization. That was back in, I want to say it would have been, let's see, she was born in 55. Yeah, like the 1970s, this happened to her. And I think she was on, on one level, maybe trying to spare me from some of the same trauma. So I've
Yeah.
had trouble getting um, help for certain things. I have been diagnosed with major depressive disorder, but it's been a whole slow process. So something I need to get looked at. But um, I found I found you to be very inspiring, because um, you you seem like you are doing a lot of doing a lot of raising awareness, and just get kind of putting a positive light out there for other neurodivergent people. Also, I have two cousins that are uh, like on both sides of my family, my mom and my dad's side, that I grew up with. One of them is like, they're kind of both on different ends of the spectrum. They're both autistic, so
Mm-hmm.
almost opposite ends of the spectrum, kind of. I'm still learning about I'm still kind of learning about the details of this, but I did grow up with them, and the younger one I also babysat growing up when he was, little, and his sister. So thankfully, I grew up with autism in my life. And so, once it occurred to me that, maybe I should see if I need to, you know, if I can get checked out and find out if this is something that I have or not. But
Mm-hmm.
it made me feel at least thankful that I know, like, a good amount of other people that have been through this, and just, and people that I can kind of look up to as well, like you, like Alex as well, and
Oh,
yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I look up to both of you
I look
actually
up
a
to you.
lot. So.
So yeah.
Thank you.
One thing that occurred to me while you were talking the last time, Lyric, when I asked you about your origin story, and you were talking about how there's kind of, I guess they call them comorbid conditions that frequently occur
Yeah.
with people who are autistic, actually autistic, and you literally created the hashtag Ask an Autistic for
Mm-hmm.
precisely this purpose, which is amazing. I mean, I don't know anybody else who's created a hashtag. I've tried,
Yeah.
but I've never been able
So
to get
cool.
to make, you know,
I've done a
that
couple.
happen.
That one's definitely the one that's really been successful in taking off. The
Okay.
other one was like a viral for a weekend. It wasn't
Fire
wasn't as big
for
of a
a
thing. This
weekend.
was like this was, but it was so needed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Which is why I think it took off
right.
because when I first came into like autistic Twitter and there was actually autistic which already existed, it was immediately obvious to me that there was a problem with that hashtag because it was the first space we had that was like supposed to be for us because like as I mentioned, when you would Google autism, it would be non-autistic people talking about autism. When you
Yeah,
search for autism or any kind of
Mhm.
autism related hashtag other than actually autistic,
right,
all you would find was non-autistic people talking about autism back then. And there
right.
weren't a lot
Mhm.
of autistic bloggers and neurodivergent bloggers like there are so many now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
There was like maybe five that I could think of back then. And they
right.
were, like you had to know who they were and know where to find them. And
Yeah,
most of them don't even make content anymore, which is really
Mhm.
sad, but I totally get it. And so, when I found actually autistic, it was obvious that there was a problem because anyone who themselves wasn't confident in like their being autistic and like I am autistic who would drop questions in there, like if they were a parent and they wanted to
hmm,
ask for help about their autistic loved one,
yeah,
or they thought they might be autistic, but they weren't sure. They were
yeah,
getting
Mhm.
chased out and chewed out and just like berated. Even people like there were people that were in there that just really like autism parents trying to like get in there that just didn't belong there. But a lot of people were there really just trying to be like learning.
hmm,
Yeah.
And being a queer person, I knew
yeah,
my queer identity in many
Mhm.
ways before I knew my neurodivergent one,
hmm, hmm,
although there are
Mhm.
parts of my queer identity that didn't come to light until after discovering my neurodivergence.
yeah,
I was familiar with the fact that you really do need to have allies to your cause because you're
yeah,
the minority. So
right.
you almost have to campaign for people who don't understand your
Yeah,
humanity to see you as a frickin' person. And I knew this from
this
being
is
a queer
great.
person. So when I understood that I was neurodivergent and how dehumanized so many of us were and how
Yeah,
misunderstood how many of us were, it just kind of like I started seeing all these parallels between those my other, different, especially the invisible marginalized identities I carry,
right.
how those
Mhm.
things are really similar. Those are things like that people outright will deny and say you don't like. I've had people tell me
Yeah.
I'm not queer
Right.
and I'm
Mhm.
just making it up. I'm not autistic and I'm just making it up. I had some woman that was just obsessed with trying to get a copy of like my diagnostic report. And the first page was
Oh my
out there on my
gosh.
Instagram for a while. It probably still is. But she wanted like the whole 15-page
Mm,
report
jeez.
and then,
Mm.
and she wanted it unredacted so she could get the information from my doctor
Okay,
because she was
Karen.
probably going to call my doctor and pretend to be me,
Wow.
and I'm like, no. Like, and it was just like, you're not
Oh,
entitled to any of
yeah.
that. And, she's probably still out there screaming into the
No.
internet
My gosh.
somewhere.
Oh my
But
gosh.
like
Mm.
she'd done this to other autistic people online and they'd given her their
That's awful.
private medical paperwork and then she'd be like, oh, well, you doctor shopped.
Oh.
So, and so it was like, they wanted that validation, and I know. And so I wanted to be an example and be like, don't give in
Oh.
to this kind of behavior because like, I remember like when I was trying to accept that I was autistic,
Mhm.
how easy it would have been if I would have come across someone like this that was just obsessively convinced that I wasn't autistic. If someone would have been this convinced I'm not
Right.
autistic, even if they
Yeah.
were a stranger back when I wasn't firm in my identity yet, I would have been like, this is the proof I needed. I'm not autistic. See, this stranger doesn't believe me, and she's an autism mom, so she must know.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I like she would have
Yeah.
been enough to shake me back when I didn't have
Yeah.
that affirmingness in my identity.
Yeah.
And when I didn't
Oh.
have that, my diagnosis wasn't able to empower me
Right.
because I wasn't able to know those parts of myself that I'd kind of pushed away. Like I didn't know my sensory needs. I didn't understand my communication needs
Right.
because I was trying too hard to do everything the way everyone else did it and
Yeah.
denying my own reality. So I
Mhm.
had to accept
Right.
that diagnosis to get on with my life and start
Yeah.
like letting myself be empowered by the information. So
Sure.
people like that are just really dangerous, but
They
that's kind of
are.
how the internet is. And you see that whether you're a
Yeah.
queer
Yeah.
person, like, with the anti-trans panic with
Mhm.
like,
Oh
oh,
my
people are
gosh.
going to pretend to be trans to
Right.
get into
Mm.
like,
You get into your
know,
bathroom so they can molest you or something because
yeah, and it's like
transgender
trans
are
people and
yeah.
marginalized people are much more likely to be victims of violence,
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Exactly. This
Mm.
is so important. So one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking about the I hate the term comorbid condition.
I like co-occurring conditions or
Co-occurring. Okay.
yeah. It's a little less like morbid just sounds so death.
I know it does sound like deathy. Well, I'm kind of into that, but
But
anyway,
not for autistic people. We don't need to be sounding all like it's a bad thing to be
Right.
autistic.
no.
Right.
Some of the co-occurring
We don't.
things, epilepsy,
Right,
not good, not great. Insomnia, I'd love to not have that.
right,
But
Yeah, I have
but
insomnia so
let's
bad.
focus on those. The
right.
autism itself, it's neither here nor there. It just is. It's just
Well,
like this is my operating system.
right. This is my thank you. One of the places that I was directed to when I first started researching this article. It's an autistic researcher in South Africa said
Mm.
on Twitter, actually, because all this started on Twitter
Back when it was a good place to be.
back before the Nazis completely took it
Yeah,
over.
ruined it. That used to be my home, man. So sad.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I think I followed you there before it became like a dystopian nightmare.
That's where I used to spend most of my time when I was
Right,
freshly diagnosed.
right. So I asked I think I shared what was it was just a stub of this article, which became the full-fledged article, and I'm still adding to it.
Yeah.
So one thing I did, it was very important for me as not an autistic person to ask an autistic, and so I I conceived this article as a kind of an open dialogue. I said, okay, no, I'm not autistic, nothing about us without us, right? So,
Hmm.
so help me out, guys. If there's anything that I'm doing that I'm saying that is not accurate to your own lived embodied experience of autism, please let me know. If there's any research that I'm not citing inaccurately, if there's anything that you think that you want to direct me towards, tell me about it. I'll go there. I'll look at the articles. I will do that deep dive. One of the so this woman in South Africa who's an actually autistic researcher said, "Have you ever heard of a guy named Dr. Ivar Lovaas?" And I was like, "No." Said, "Check it out. Check it out." I did, and that was mind bending. See,
Well,
as
yeah, and then you look at George Reckers and James
oh,
Dobson and the Christian
okay,
nationalists because they're all
yeah,
connected.
well they are talking
Focus
about
on the family, like
there's oh my
same
gosh, yes,
people.
it's the
And
same
it's
people.
like you can see them talking about using the ABA methods for childhood indoctrination on the
Yes,
Focus on the Family website.
right,
Reckers and Dobson, and then
right,
Reckers and Lovas. Those are
exactly,
it's all connected.
and Lovas was among other things the father of conversion therapy,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right,
him and Reckers.
right, exactly, and so I tend to derail myself, so I'm trying to keep this thread, and I'm on the struggle bus here. The
We both are today.
especially because I have brain trauma as well as being in NDAF hashtag NDAF. So okay, so Dr. Ivar Lovas was one of he did this 1987 article, which was cited by both Dr. Blythe Corbett and Kimberly Lanny, who was basically a lab rat. What you're going to do to me, Dr. Lanny, have me declared a security risk to Kaiser Permanente? You did that shit already, okay?
Right.
And I'm using her name. I always use her name. I think it's important to name the perpetrators. This week we name Donald John Trump as is a traitor to the United States of America. He's also a rapist. But anyway, yes, you name the names, you say the things that need to be said. Um, so Dr. Lovis in 1987, after he'd become famous in a Time Life magazine article, a photo essay in which he's
It's really
depicted,
bad.
and what a trigger warning. Okay, so if you're seriously trigger warning, I don't recommend looking at these photos, but it was considered, this is one of the reasons why a neurodivergency movement, just like any civil rights movement, was so fucking necessary, is because people like this, it was, you know,
Yeah.
like the,
Well, he didn't think we were people, and he
he
said
didn't
that
think
in his
that we were
interview.
people. Yeah. He said, what did he say? He said that
You have to construct a
you have to
person because we're
construct,
people in the physical
Um,
sense, but not the emotional sense, or
not the,
something like that. It's really gross. Like basically,
real-
you have to use ABA to like build a person because we aren't
build a person,
people.
like
Yeah,
build a
something
bear.
like that. Really
You could
gross.
you could dark sense of humor, occupational hazard, build a bear, right? You could go to a mall and you could build an
Gonna
autistic,
program us like robots. We don't even be
right.
people.
Yes.
I thought because Dr. Lanny is sick fuck and so is Dr. Corbett, that they were the exception to the rule because they're also double dipping into, NIH funds to the tune of millions of dollars in order to get that good government money. Dr. Corbett actually signed off, was Dr. Corbett got the funds from the NIH. Then she signed off on Dr. Lanny's doctoral thesis, which was basically piggybacking off her own research. Dr. Lenny didn't do any of the work. She was basically a lab rat. Yes, I'm talking about you, Dr. Lenny. What are you going to do? Have me declared a security threat? You're going to bring in the security guard, the rent-a-cop that you're working with at Kaiser Permanente Roseville? Okay, you already did that shit. It didn't work. I've been to, ever since I got that certified mail letter, anonymous certified mail letter, which declared me a security risk and says, oh, I have to do all these things. And the federal government. Signed off on it. So technically, every time that I enter a Kaiser Permanente facility, I am in violation of this official security threat protocol. Guess what? I've had numerous appointments with Kaiser Permanente, and I never saw one security guard. So it's bullshit. Okay, so you know this is the reality. But I thought because Dr. Lanny is so awful and so sleazy and so corrupt that she and Blythe Corbett were, of course, probably unique in using some really, really outdated autism research, right? It was obviously even Dr. Lovas himself, I'm ashamed to share a Norwegian heritage with him. Even Dr. Lovas himself, he later stopped doing the literal fucking beating of autistic children and the strapping them down and shocking them repeatedly because it was considered abusive and it became somewhat controversial. Gee,
Only probably because they took his funding.
they took his fun.
I bet they wouldn't have done it. I bet if he wouldn't have lost his funding,
Like,
he wouldn't have stopped. I'm just saying,
okay.
because there
What?
was a period, I don't know what year that was, where he lost funding for his excessive use of corporal punishment. But eventually he did lose funding for the abuse.
Isn't that kind of
But
redundant?
but I'm
Excessive
I'm
use
trying to
of
remember if
quote.
it was only for abusing the queer kids and the autistic kids continued to get abused, because that might have been the case.
Mhm.
And it wouldn't surprise
Thank
me if it
you.
was like, oh yeah, you can't abuse queer kids anymore, but you can keep abusing the neurodivergent ones,
You're you're
you
you're a,
know.
you're a straight up gangster, Lyric. You're a,
I don't know about that.
no,
I
you
just
are.
I just put a long time putting all the dang timelines together and tying
Well,
together all the frickin' players in this thing.
because as an educator working with, low income, inner city kids in LA in like what used to be South Central, so a lot of my students were literally gangsters. So I can say, yes, we're neighbors with Rage Against the Machine. So yes, at
Outrage.
some point. So yeah,
I don't
you
know. I grew up in a rough neighborhood, but I don't know if I'd
know,
call myself a gangster, but that's
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But having the ability to say the things is really almost
Yeah.
people will punish you for that.
oh yeah.
Hmm.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Talking about ABA and all of that, and just talking about behaviorism in general has been the thing I've gotten the most pushback
Yeah.
on, especially because it's
Yeah.
medically recommended for a lot of things. It's not even just autism, really, it's the recommendation for any young person
Right,
who has
Hmm.
behavioral issues, which is completely
right,
not trauma informed, because
right.
usually young people are acting out because they have unmet needs or have been
Yeah,
traumatized and they don't know how
right,
to deal with it.
Yes.
And
right,
so
right, right,
you squish the behavior, you're just squishing the signals that something is not, they're not getting help and they need help.
right,
And you're just like, okay, I see
Yes.
that you need help. Let's stop that, please. Stop asking for help.
Right.
Stop that.
Yeah.
Stop.
yes,
It's inconvenient. We don't appreciate your behavior. You need to make
Right.
yourself
right,
palatable because you're not easy to
right.
digest.
You're not easy
Yeah.
to digest. You don't
Yeah, and
go
even
down
Paris
smoothly.
Hilton is a big advocate against behaviorism. You've got those behavior camps in the desert
Right.
they send kids
Yeah.
to. They've got the
Thank you.
Christian
Yeah,
conversion
Yeah.
therapy
I
camps.
was
They've
doing a
got
I'm a
good job of that.
fan.
ADHD is being pushed
Yeah.
into ABA now, you
Yes.
know?
Mhm.
I'm sorry. What was that about ADHD and ABA?
Oh, ABA is being recommended for ADHD a lot of times now
Great.
too, not just
So it's
autism, because
one,
we're impulsive and we have bad behaviors. They're trying to use
oh my gosh,
ABA.
oh my gosh, oh my gosh. So kind of relate this to, I mean, it's all as you've said, it's just sort of like the dark intersectionality. Um,
Yeah, and it's not always called ABA. That's the thing, but it's
right.
packaged the same
The
way with different
this
names.
this kind of cabal of okay, so they are, I want to name them. I want to use the terms. I want to use the accurate terms that are used by the ACLU, by the Southern Poverty Law Center, by responsible citizens, rational, humane citizens. These terms are white nationalism,
Mhm.
white supremacy, Christian nationalism, and as far as if you're going to do a Venn diagram, it would be like that. White
Yeah.
supremacy, white nationalism, Christian nationalism, transphobia, um, hatred of anti-Semitism,
Mhm.
um, xenophobia, um, all forms of ableism,
Yeah.
hatred also of transgender people, specifically targeting transgender people in a very disingenuous attempt to, in many ways, using the same exact tactics that the Nazis used in the
Mm.
1930s.
They
Okay,
want to erase us from public life. Like you already
Yeah.
see, I already see it in the comments. Like there was
yes,
some
Yeah.
on Instagram. I took a screenshot of it. Someone was talking about how there's bathhouses in Japan where you're not allowed to have tattoos, and they're like, yeah, we should do that with the public with trans people and not allow them in the public. And it's just like right there in the comments, like, and it's just like people are
Mm.
not even hiding it ever since they got the most recent presidential elect news. Like, they're not hiding it anymore. They're emboldened by it.
right. And a very similar thing happened once absolute anarchy and chaos and the basically the gutting of our freedoms by a coalition of people who were literally embedded with the Russian government, working with the Russian government to basically gut the United States, our system of our way of life, that that remember that guy. There was a 17-year-old kid who crossed state lines with an automatic rifle in order to, you know what I'm talking about?
No, sorry, no idea.
There was during the riots against police brutality in the wake of, you know, George Floyd, and there were major uprisings and all in many major cities.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think I remember it.
I forget the state, but it was so the 17-year-old kid who was affiliated with the Proud Boys. He crossed state lines. He bought a weapon that was actually illegal for him to own, and then he joined a protest of police brutality during which he actually shot and murdered two people, and he mutilated a third person, and he got off, and he was firing on protesters, and he got off. And the reason was that the judge is MAGA. I mean, he was literally caught on camera. His cell phone was playing, "Proud to Be an American," by Lee Greenwood, which was my MAGA cousin Jeanette Johnson Summers. We're going to wind up on the wrong side of the barbed wire fence when the fascists roll in with their fucking, whatever, their troops. She used to send me the Proud to Be an American song. Well, the judge was playing it on his phone. So he his decision was that this young man who had literally murdered two people was good to go. And a lot of the commentary on social media was in favor of this guy. And you know why? Because one of the people that he murdered was a sex offender who had actually wandered into this crowd of protesters.
I didn't even know that.
He wasn't even supposed to be there, right? And they were like, "Oh, he killed the pedophile. He killed the chomo," right? And so that justified it. The fact, never mind that he took a human life. Never mind that he crossed state lines, bought an illegal weapon for him in order to consciously fire upon protesters of police brutality, who were with an automatic weapon, who were, peaceable, and how he was provoked. This little kid who looks like a sort of a human teddy bear is that this mentally ill, this mental patient who he murdered threw a plastic bag at him, and he was like, "Oh, oh, oh, oh," oh my gosh, I gotta, so he was, I forget his name, but he became the darling of he spoke at the Republican National Convention that year, and was lauded. And they've got people, I mean, we've got here in Sacramento who, there's this woman who was, have you ever heard of Telegram? It's a social, it's basically Twitter for Nazis.
Ew.
Yeah.
No.
So there's this woman who formed what is called the Terrorgram Collective. And these people worship mass shooters. They consider them literally like saints.
That's gross.
That's gross.
Really gross.
Right? It's
That's
really
just
gross.
Really gross.
She was unmasked as the voice of the Terrorgram Collective. So they're part of something called accelerationists, and the accelerationists believe that we need to, basically they're sort of like Charles Manson. Okay, they think
Ew.
that we need to start a race war against the, you know what I mean, and against the, black people and anybody who doesn't look like us and like white people, and that the means to accelerate this waste war, why they call themselves accelerationists, is because they use things like train derailment, they use things like attacking the infrastructure, attacking the power grid. Remember last year, there was more than 100 incidents of, first it was like attacks on the power grid, specifically in North Carolina, but it's also in Florida. It's also on the West Coast. It was also in Washington State. It was all traced back to Nazis who were tied in with the most extreme forms of anti-Semitism, racism, xenophobia, hatred of, gay people imaginable. These people are insane. And the Department of Homeland Security, in a public memo in February of 2023, actually they posted it. See, be on the lookout for attacks on the grid, attacks on the infrastructure, attacks on the hard, whatever hard targets, right? The power grid. Boom, 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 boom. This woman was involved with that. She was friends with some of the people who actually attacked the power grid, who were arrested and found guilty of attacking the power grid. You don't hear anything about this.
Right.
So she narrated. She was known as like the Gore Lolita because she was into gore movies, right? The Gore Lolita, and just look that up, and it'll just petrify you. Ooh, was right.
No thanks.
So no thanks. But this is
right.
So she lives. Okay, so this woman narrated this accelerationist manifesto, in which she called mass murderers saints. But it's like, it reminds me of that song, "Sympathy for the Devil," and all the cops are criminals and all the sinners saints. Well, and she was exposed as the voice, as the narrator of this accelerationist manual, right? And did anything happen to her? Because she's literally the leader of a terrorist cell. And she lives downtown Sacramento with a convicted pedophile sex offender who's her boyfriend. Now, do you think anything happened to
That's double
her?
ew.
No, nothing. There was a lot of things that happened last year. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, but I think this is important because it's talking about how we got to where we are. It happened many, many years ago, but the Sacramento police are tied in with white supremacists, with the Proud Boys, and I think it's one of the reasons that I've been targeted. Because they know that I know, and I'm speaking out. I'm speaking out that there was a trans pride parade in Sacramento. There was a woman who was the sister of a guy who was a Proud Boy, who was one of the leaders of the Proud Boys, who was kicked out of the Proud Boys for being too racist. And he was a close friend of one of our Sacramento County Board of Supervisors members named Sue Frost. And Sue Frost is married to a guy with the risible name of Jack Frost. I mean, his name is literally Jack Frost. Frost is a leader of something called the Constitutional Sheriffs Movement. And what that is they believe that they're similar to sovereign citizens. They believe that the sheriffs, basically racist, fucking, transphobic monsters, um, white supremacists, they're Christian nationalists, of course. They believe that the sheriff should be in charge, and they are directly tied in with the January 6th insurrection. So
Yeah.
you have this perfect storm of, you know, anyway. So the sister of the guy who's the best friend of the Sacramento Board of County Supervisors member, Sue Frost, who's married to Jack Frost, constitutional sheriff, um, who provided, I believe, provided the security for um, not Dershowitz, but the guy with the melty, um, that Trump's lawyer, the mayor.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that guy. Anyway, you're properly repulsed by this information, Lyric. So, so this the sister of the Proud Boy, who's wired in with the Sacramento police, right? She they were this happened last year. I think it was in March. There was a trans pride parade. She she had a and in California we're not like Texas. I mean, in Texas you can carry a gun into a church and point it at the pastor's head, and that would be totally legal, right? Here we're in California. Ironically, our gun laws are so strict because of the Black Panthers, right? It was, gun laws were great and like freedom, open carry, whatever, until the Black Panthers showed up. And it was like, hey, motherfuckers, we carry too. And they're like, oh, that's a bridge too far, man. Black people cannot arm themselves, right? So our gun laws are the strictest in the nation
Because of racism.
because of
Go
racism,
figure.
ironically enough, because of Governor Ronald Reagan.
Hmm.
And so, anyway, yes,
I've got about 15 minutes, y'all.
Oh, I'm so sorry, I derailed. Um,
I just wanted to make sure I put a little note, but like I packed them. Like when I have calls, I don't usually have just one in a day. I've usually kind of got a few
oh
end
yeah,
capped.
so promote. Okay, so Lyric Rivera is doing X, Y, and Z. Um, you've got signed copies of your book, Workplace um, Neurodiversity
Rising. Yeah.
Rising,
That's
Nice.
right here. Yeah. Oh, I got here.
and it's amazing.
I'm a
And
little proud of it.
you've
It's my
been
baby.
you've been blurred by Forbes magazine, right?
I was blurbed in Forbes when it came out, and that was
Yeah,
really humbling because just me and my self-published little book, and I did
Oh.
hit the bestseller in business ethics on Amazon when it came out as a new release. So that was really exciting
Mhm.
because when you self-publish, you never know, and it's really been a
Yeah.
word of mouth book. I think it's still either 4.5 or 5 stars or close to it on Amazon and Goodreads. Last I checked, knock on wood. And it's been a labor of love, and it was just like I wanted to make something that you could give to an employer and you could start making immediate
Um,
changes, many of which just require being empathetic and compassionate and
yeah,
don't cost money at all other than time. And I wanted to remove the excuses. And so that's my first book. So it's Workplace Neurodiversity Rising. And I've just started putting together the outline in the first few chapters of my next book, which will be kind of a neurodiversity as I see it. Not a workplace book, but just a more general neurodiversity in the world kind of a book, which I'm really excited about because there's so much a lot of people get wrong about neurodiversity and just like what qualifies even as being neurodivergent.
right.
And like, it's like people sometimes are like, it's only things you're born with, which is
Mm.
literally not what the coiner of the term intended it to be. It's basically any way your brain, if you have a brain that diverges from the average normative
Yeah,
norm, and it doesn't
Mhm.
matter if you were
right,
born that way, it's acquired, whether it's, a
right,
temporary divergence that might heal later, like
right.
what we're talking about is the fact that your experience is outside of the average. And
Yeah,
so we probably are going to need to modify the world to help you get your needs met.
Yeah.
And it's all about getting your needs met and not blaming you for struggling
Right.
when you're in a
Right.
system that has been
Yeah.
historically ignoring your needs.
Right.
And
Right.
so
Right.
that was kind of the thesis of the workplace book, but
Mhm.
it's the same idea, but really this does apply to the world, not just workplaces. It really applies to any system where you have people, whether it's communities or otherwise. And so I really want to look at the idea of like really what is this neurodiversity and what does it mean to be neurodivergent, like the neurodiversity paradigm as a whole.
Yeah.
And so that's the next thing I'm digesting and self-publishing. And I hope it won't take as many years as it took
Right.
this one. Like I'm really excited. So I'm like, maybe it'll be out in less than a year. I don't know. We'll
Cool.
we'll see. That
Right.
might be
Right.
overambitious.
Yeah.
Probably is
Yeah.
overambitious.
I love that you think in terms of systems and paradigms, because I think that's really where your work is extremely valuable, and a lot of people will benefit because um, we have even people like, who is that young woman in this Swedish woman who's talks about climate
Oh,
change, and
Greta
Greta, yeah, Greta
Thunberg.
Thunberg. And so for a lot of people, that is an autistic face, that is a recognizable
Hmm.
autistic face. But in terms of tying back in things like queer rights, transgender rights, visibility for everybody, and connecting those dots, I think is very important. And you're doing a lot of good work. Okay, so two questions. What kind of tangible successes that you had in terms of spreading awareness, informing businesses, and changing business practices? Could you point to a specific situation or incident, or where you were able to affect how a business was conducted as far as neurodiversity?
Yeah. So, I mean, there have been multiple ones. One of my favorite, I think, would be the fact that I was able to deliver training for 1 million employees of one unnamed organization,
Oh my gosh.
many of them live, some asynchronous because it is a global organization. And so it was
Mhm.
recorded so that the ones that were asleep when we were presenting could come back and watch later. And so that's just a really humbling experience because, when I started out, you asked about my origin story. It was like, one
Yeah.
of the things I realized is autistic people and neurodivergent people, we've kind of got this PR problem where we've been stigmatized by the world and made to be this boogeyman that everyone's afraid of, much like being trans is right now. Like
Mhm.
we're
Right.
people are selling this gloom and doom and be afraid of autistic people, be
Right.
afraid of neurodivergent people, be afraid of trans people.
Mhm.
And the fact that I got to talk to 1 million people within one system
Mhm.
about what it means to be neurodivergent. And actually, that organization I've spoken to on multiple occasions now,
Nice.
at least two, maybe even three times. My
Yeah.
numbers not so great, but at least one of those occasions before the political climate got very anti-queer, we actually did a neuroqueer inclusion training. And so
Nice.
that, even though things are kind of hard right now as far as talking about things in that, queer
Neuro.
area,
Yes.
because there's an intersection there. There's a major intersection there. And for a
Mhm.
lot of us, like it's
I
hard to
love that.
separate out where, our experiences of our gender identity or who we're attracted to, our
Yeah.
orientations, like being polyamorous, like
Right.
where does that
Right.
end from the fact that I'm someone who doesn't fit within the social constructs?
Right.
Because those are just social constructs.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
like, I
Yeah.
can't, like, all these things come from my brain. So I can't tell
Right.
where one thing ends and the next begins. It's all me. Which
Right.
will be another thing is like talking about the intersectionality of a lot of different people's
Sure.
identities will be a big part in the
Mhm.
next book too.
Okay.
Uh,
Love it.
because the workplace, I had to make it a little bit more clean. So we stuck to the neurodiversity thing only,
Right.
but
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
uh, I get to go wider this time.
And as far as I understand that you're also selling some signed copies of Workplace Neurodiversity Rising from your
I am.
on your blog. So how can people get those signed copies? What they have to do?
Mhm.
So the probably the easiest way is to like find me on my Substack because
Okay.
that's where I've posted about it. I need to actually put it on my website
Mhm.
too,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
go kind of quick, and sometimes by the time I get them up on my website when they're back in stock, I get about 15 at a time because I have to buy them. As an author, you have
Right.
to
Right.
buy
Yeah.
them up front,
Yeah.
and then
Right. Right.
I have to ship them and
Sure.
buy supplies. So I do about
Yeah.
15 at a time. I've got to think about 7 or 8 left right now, and I ship once a month. And so I do updates on my Facebook page and on my Substack as well. Those are the first people to hear when they are released. I'm
Mhm.
shipping to the US and the UK and Australia currently. I'm gonna get shipping information about Portugal this week and find out how much that is. So if you want to know about shipping, or if you want a book, you can just email info@neurodivergentconsulting.org. That's probably the
Okay.
easiest way to get me. Then you don't have to
Okay.
go searching. I'll send you a link. I'll make it easy for you.
Nice. Nice.
Sounds great.
Let's see. So a lot of my friends are talking about Blue Sky. Have you
I'm just going
did it?
back on there. I had an
Yeah.
account and then I didn't use it because there weren't very many people on there when it first was new. And then recently, I guess something happened and people started talking about it again.
Mm.
So I'm trying again now that it's having a
Mm.
second coming.
That's awesome. Do you have any tips for our viewers as far as safety concerns with this very troubling political state of affairs?
It's really hard, like for queer people, like for so many years, we were like, we're out and we're proud. But honestly, in the coming months, being out and proud might not be as safe as it has been in the past. And
Yeah,
some of us are like, I'll never go back in the closet.
right,
But that's a very privileged take to have. Like, if you can really be safe and not go back in the closet, like, good for you. I love that
right,
because we do
right,
need
right,
people that are willing to be out and proud and bold. And
right,
like me, I
right.
can't go back. Like, all my public information's out there. I can't take it back. So, like,
Yeah,
I kind of regret
Mhm.
that at this point. Like, maybe I should have
right,
used a moniker and not used my real face, because
Oh,
if shit gets really bad, like, it's all out there. It's too late. So I'm out here
yeah,
for better or for worse, but like those are things to consider. Like, if you might not be in a position where that's going to be okay, like putting yourself out there the way I have,
yeah,
you know, it's not for everyone, but those of us who can, I think it's so important because like you said, like having that representation and having someone that you can look to that like has an experience you can relate to when you don't relate to a large portion of the world, that's a lot
right,
of different marginalized identities can relate to that
yeah,
experience of needing to have someone that like gives voice to an experience you had but never knew anyone else could possibly understand or how to articulate. It's so important, but at the
yes,
same time, shit might be about to get crazy. So like you
right,
got to do what you can to like, keep yourself safe. Don't share things with people you don't feel safe sharing with. Like
right,
your safety matters. And if you're just as valid even if you are in the closet, or if you're
right,
doing what you need to stay safe right now, especially if
yeah,
you're stuck somewhere like Florida or Texas or
right,
Tennessee. It's real
exactly,
bad.
right, right. How bad is it for you in Texas? I mean,
It
how,
depends on the city.
okay, you're in Austin, which is fairly liberal, right?
Closest big city is Austin. I'm actually in a small town I won't disclose because people
Sure,
are always trying to find out where I am.
yeah,
But I live somewhere that's not tied to an address I put anywhere in writing ever.
nice,
Like, yeah, I've had
don't blame you.
I've had shady
smart,
people trying to hunt me down,
Yeah,
unfortunately. So I
yeah,
got to be really over cautious of my location. But
yeah,
I
yeah,
understand.
you see the nationalists, man. They're out there with their
Mhm.
signs.
Yeah.
yeah. What are we gonna do? I almost feel like we need some sort of like bat signal or something. You know, what are
Right.
we gonna do if the communications get shut down?
Yeah, I don't like, well, it's like it's most likely if anything gets shut down or reduced, it's going to be social media, which
Yeah,
is why I'm really leaning heavier into Substack and things that are like a direct mailing list where it's
yeah,
like hopefully I can email people because if you opt
right,
into the emails, you're going to get the emails because it's not throttled by the algorithm. You get every
right,
email you sign up for. So
yes,
I'm
Mm.
leaning more into the mailing lists as the
right,
ways to like be able to contact people.
sure,
Uh, I've already noticed the fact that we got just a couple minutes, but like social media, if I want to get the word out about an event that's
hmm
happening or my book sale or something,
yeah,
social media doesn't distribute that to anybody unless I pay them to distribute it. But at Substack, that's why I send it there first.
right,
Everyone who signed up for the email will get the email,
right,
so
exactly, exactly,
um you can't count on social media. It's
Mm.
selectively sending you to people. On Facebook, it's often
Mhm.
selectively
exactly,
sending you to people
Yeah.
who will be outraged about your content.
exactly.
Mhm. Right.
Okay, this it's been enormous. I wish we had more time. You have to go. But we've really enjoyed having you on the Small Bear and Pickles show. I love the contribution that you made to We Are Gregor, which we are, Alea and I are co-editing for Nocturnicorn Books. And
Thank you.
hopefully,
Thank
Ray,
you.
Sheridan, Rose, if you're out there,
Love
please,
you.
we love you and we want to involve you. We want to, we have ambitions to work with you on other projects besides We Are Gregor. So for the Small Bear and Pickles show, this has been Alex S. Johnson with my co-host Alea Celeste Williams and our fabulous guest Lyric Rivera, aka Neurodivergent Rebel. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you, Lyric. It was great meeting you, getting to talk to you.
Thank you both so much. I hope you have a great rest of your week. I gotta
You
go.
too.
Bye, all.
Take care.
All right. Have a great one. Thank you. Okay. All right. I think that went good. I think it went well.
Yes. We're still at